way, the best way to assure that is to.
I'm going to need to defer to the test. Oh, sure. I won't be here on October 13th.
You know.
Well, I can do the first two and then catch the 1.5 later.
That'd be great.
Okay, yeah. So the 13th.
So then he can't.
The reason they want. You've been.
The thing that's listed Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I'm Reverend Mary Tarbell Green, the Associate Minister for Pastoral Care here at First Church. And I'm joined this morning by the renowned Reverend Dr. Riegel, our developmental minister here at First Church. First Church is a place where you're free to be you. So bring your questioning mind, your expansive heart, your entire self to this beloved community. Our mission is to welcome with love and to support learning and spiritual growth and to serve our wider community and to work for justice, equality, equity, and inclusion. Please make sure to read the announcements in the inserts today in the order of service. Silence your phones. And you can find important information regarding our accommodations and our upcoming events. If you're visiting here today, we especially welcome you. Please feel free to join us in the coffee hour afterwards following this service. It takes place in the Ellen Hall. There'll be ushers out there that can direct you if you don't know where that is. And we'd love to have a chance to get to know you and tell you more about our beloved community. Flowers. Happy anniversary to you. Where are you? Rosie and Chris, 25th wedding anniversary. They've actually been together for 32 years, but this is 25. Next Sunday, about 20 to 30 minutes following the service, the board will hold the congregational meeting. The agenda has been sent ahead of time for you to review and preview, and as always, a quorum must be met in order for attendance. In person and online, we do both. Childcare will be provided, and voting is a privilege of membership and contributes to our beloved community. So just pencil in next week, congregational meeting. It's really, really informative. Following today's service, the membership committee will hold the first of 3 sessions as a pathway to new membership. If you've been considering membership here at First Church, we hope that you'll be able to attend. The next 2 sessions are Sunday, October 6, Sunday, October 13, following services. And all 3 classes will be held in the Fisher Room, which is actually right next door, kind of right there. Again, an usher will direct you if you need to. And now we're going to wave to our neighbors on Zoom, and we will greet our neighbors here in person, and then you'll hear the bell ring to say, bring you back. So greet your neighbors.
Even our worship associates succumb to the crowd today.
I wouldn't know I didn't bring it.
It's still vibrating. We're going to light our chalice this morning. Thank you very much for lighting our chalice. Aren't these beautiful? Those who love know God. Those who do not love do not know God, for God is love. And Patty Kelly's going to welcome us with some board moments.
Good morning, everybody. I am here to share the September board moment, and we just like to get in front of you every month and keep you up to date or tell you what's on our minds. Now, as Mary pointed out, we have a congregational meeting next Sunday, the 29th, so I'm not going to preempt that. We have plenty of stuff to talk about then. This is what came to my mind yesterday. We had church council yesterday, which is a meeting of all of the leaders of the committees and teams in the church. And as Barbara Bonney, our board president, rightly noted, we have an amazing, creative, hardworking team of leaders and members of the committees and teams, and we're so grateful because we couldn't do anything without them. But I invite you to consider other people who serve our church in ways that you might not even notice. So for example, the ushers and greeters who get here early once a month to make everybody welcome. And did you know that the ushers hand-fold all of these orders of service? We have volunteers in religious education who started off helping in classes when their kids were little, and they never left. Decades later, they're still helping, and we couldn't run our program without them. We have choir members and bell choir members who come to practice every week. We have gentlemen, I'm sure you know, I'm not going to name people, obviously, or I'd be here all day, but we have extremely selfless individuals who come and fix things around the church all the time. And certainly, last but absolutely not least, is the coffee hour hosts. People who get here every Sunday to make coffee, to set up, and to do the dishes afterwards so that we can all enjoy fellowship with each other. These are acts of service and love that keep our beloved community alive. And I just invite you to remember that I know a lot of us, probably everybody appreciates all that hard work, but appreciation is like fertilizer that helps the community grow and thrive. And the more you can appreciate all those wonderful people, and even the person sitting next to you who gives you a smile when you come in to the service, that helps us build our beloved community. So thanks.
Just real quick, speaking of coffee hour, the delicacies at coffee hour are fresh leftovers from yesterday's service of Reverend Frank Carpenter. We were packed. It was a beautiful service. Thank you very much, Alex. And he was honored so beautifully. So when you bite into that chocolate chip cookie, please think of Frank Carpenter. So please rise if you're able. Our first hymn is number 131, Love Will Guide Us, found in the gray hymnal.
Go ahead and breathe for a moment. It's not a complex contraption, but I'm not an engineer. This is a spontaneous moment. There's a joke that was circulating when I was in divinity school. I went to Harvard Divinity School. I think most folks know that. And MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was just a little ways down the road from there. And so the joke, which is a really bad joke, but part of the reason really bad jokes are funny is because they're really bad. And so the joke was a way that Harvard people and MIT people would prod each other would be, this student was going through the line at the grocery store, and he had 13 items in the 12-item checkout. And when he went through and the cashier counted his items, she said, "Do you go to Harvard and can't count, or MIT and can't read?" I wasn't an MIT guy. As you can tell, I even struggle with contraptions like this. Thank God we have an AV crew. Thank God we have an AV crew. All right, so this morning is another somewhat pensive, contemplative morning. It's not like the poetry readings I did a couple of weeks ago. But the material I want to share this morning takes a little time to sit with. And so I sometimes say to people that there's certain material that needs to be pondered and not simply read or listened to. And people say, well, what do you mean pondered? And what I mean by pondered is you take your time with the material, you listen to it, let it sink in, and you pause to let it sort of ruminate inside of you so it can begin to make connections at a deeper level with you than just a quick understanding of the mind and then you move on to the next subject matter. So ponder means to sit with material and to sit with it inside you and see how it does or doesn't resonate with your own internal subjective experience in the world. And to me, this is an important practice, an important ability for personal growth. So a lot of what I say today is about pondering. So I'm going to take my time. We're going to pause and breathe and sit with some stuff, and we'll still get out on time. Right? So the first thing we're going to ponder this morning is this morning's meditation. This is a meditation by the Sufi mystic poet Hafez. And it's one I return to over and over again, so I might already have read this to you once. But as I often say to people, personal growth, personal transformation is also dependent on returning to important, meaningful material over and over again, because every time you approach it, it might speak to you differently. So this is entitled, "Is Your Caravan Lost?" from which I took the title for today's sermon. My dear, is your caravan lost? Is your caravan lost? It is, if you can no longer be kind to yourself. It is, if you could no longer be loving to those who must live with the sometimes difficult task of loving you. Is your caravan lost? If so, at least come to know that someone untied your camel last night. For I hear its gentle voice calling for God in the desert. At least come to know that Hafez will always hold a lantern with galaxies booming inside, and that I will always guide your soul to the divine warmth and exhilaration of our beloved's tent. So another poem from Hafez. When I first began to love God, when I first began to love God, I thought I had fallen into the ocean. But it turns out I was only on the beach. But eventually, I was pulled into that water, into that ocean. And then I was thrown back on shore, only to find myself pulled into the ocean again. And then thrown back on shore, and pulled into the ocean again, into the tumult of those waves. God, oh God, why did I want this love? And what is all this back and forth? One of my favorite things to do is to parse mystic poetry, as you pretty much know by now. I love this poem because it speaks, Hafez and Rumi especially speak from time to time more honestly about the spiritual journey and how difficult it is. And the reason it's difficult is because the domain of love is a harsher reality than we think. What it demands of us, how it treats us, what its expectations are. And I love that they present this difficulty to us in their poetry, because we almost never speak about this dimension of love. Love is not an easy path. Love is not an easy path. And when I think about beloved community, I often wonder, is it simply a prosaic idea that soothes us to think about in the abstract? Or is it a lived experience that we are committed to creating together? And if so, are we committed to what it really takes to live in the domain of love? And I'm not so sure. And by we, I don't mean just First Church. I mean every community I've ever experienced that calls itself a beloved community. I always wonder about this question. Does our community really understand what it takes to be a beloved community? To live in the domain of love together as a community? And that's what this morning's about. I am upping the ante on the love game. I am upping the ante on the love game. Last year I talked a fair amount about it, especially at the beginning of the year, but throughout the year, about how hard it is to come from a loving place, given that we're driven by our instinctual nature that often acts counter to love. And we stewed in that last year, and we ruminated about that last year. It was a prosaic idea to contemplate last year. But this year, I want us to put some flesh on those bones. I want us to challenge ourselves to up the ante for love and do what it takes to truly be a beloved community. I think I told you at one point, I feel like I've been here 10 years, and not in a bad way, in a good way. It's like, oh my God, 1 year with these people is like 10 years. That's not what I mean. I've become so comfortable, and I've been able to share so much of myself that I've already forgotten how much of myself and what I've shared with you in a year. Like, did I say that a week ago? Did I say that 2 months ago? Did I say that 2 years ago? I don't remember sometimes what I've shared with you. So this year, you risk a fair amount of redundancy with me. And so this might be redundant. I don't know if I've shared with you before that I have a lot of $1 million ideas. And one of those $1 million ideas is a t-shirt and bumper sticker online store. Did I share this with you? I have what I consider to be a lot of pithy sayings that I could sell on t-shirts and bumper stickers. Although every time I share this with my close friends, they say, you're not going to make any money. Not the way you think about the world, you know. So I still have this thought experiment in my head that someday when I retire, I'll have a part-time t-shirt and bumper sticker online store. And so I've got a couple of dozen sayings, and one of them is this. You got to have a black t-shirt in white print that says, what part of agape do you not understand? The unconditional part or the love part? Agape is the Greek term for unconditional love. And it is a term that is used a lot in the New Testament to talk about Jesus' ministry. And indeed, if you read the Bible from that perspective, you understand that more than anything else, Jesus embodied as a lived example unconditional love. And unconditional love means to love without conditions. Ponder that for a minute. We almost always love with conditions. And what are those conditions? Do you satisfy my agenda for my instinctual nature? If so, I will affirm you. If not, I'll label you a scoundrel with a capital S. You're a problem for me. Our love always comes with conditions of some sort along these lines. But the message of Jesus was, love needs to be unconditional. You could spend a lifetime thinking about that line alone. What does it mean to love unconditionally? It means to love regardless of who the scoundrel is. Which is another way of saying we have to love others despite ourselves. We need to love others despite ourselves. Because not only did Jesus say that God is love, he also said, when he was departing his disciples, love one another, even as I have loved you. That's another lifetime of pondering. Love one another even as I have loved you. He didn't mean love those who love you. Right? That's not what that means. He means love one another as I have loved you. Love one another unconditionally. It is a tall ethical command. You know, the reason I talked about how everywhere I hear the phrase beloved community used by a group of people or an organization, I end up wondering, is it just a prosaic idea or something this group is deeply committed to? It's because I always see conditions for love in groups. Can you be a beloved community if you're going to set conditions for love on people? That isn't to say all behavior is acceptable, right? And that's a whole nother sermon. But it is to say you have to continue loving regardless. It's hard to know what that looks like, to continue loving someone whose behaviors are not acceptable. But I think beloved community requires this of us. And it's a process of discernment how to do that. Edwin Markham, a poet, summed this up in a very simple poem, which I have been returning to more and more as I've been contemplating what I think our year needs to look like together. Markham wrote this, you might know this. He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. Now think about the scoundrels in your life. Could you take them all in? Could you foreground love and background your own agenda to take in the scoundrel? I think beloved community does that. So how do we get there? Two things. One, it requires work on ourselves, the recognition where we're failing to love unconditionally, and why that's the case, which requires some introspection and work on ourselves. And at times it may require forgiveness. And those are my only 2 talking points for the rest of the sermon. So requiring the work we need to do on ourselves, here's a little bit of Rumi for you. The way of love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. You hear the radical honesty in Rumi's words there? The door to love is devastation. Birds make great sky circles of their freedom. How do they learn this? They fall. And falling, they are given wings. The way of love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. What does that mean? I love parsing this poem out with people. That's another one you got to sit with for a while. But I'll save us a little time. Why is the door to love devastation? Because sometimes, to get to the place of love within us, to reach the domain of love and act from that domain in the real world, you got to tear down the impediments you find within yourself that prevent you from being able to love others regardless. In other words, love is devastating to the ego that can't look beyond its own agenda. It has to be taken apart, or you will never be able to love other regardless. That's what Rumi means when he says the door there is devastation. It's a scary prospect. The ego is all we know. And Rumi is saying, if you truly want to reach into love, experience it and act from that place, the cost of that purchase may very well be your very being. And that's why the rest of the poem is a poem about faithfulness. What if I give this all up to come from love? It's a scary prospect, that devastation. And Rumi says, think of the birds. They make great sky circles of their freedom. When you're trapped in your own egoic agenda, you are not free. Another one of my bumper stickers is, only love is free. It has 2 meanings, and I mean them both. Only love is free. But the bird is free. It makes great sky circles. And this is what Rumi is calling us to become by submitting ourselves to the devastation of the impediments within us that prevent us from loving from a place of freedom. How do they learn it? He says, they fall, and falling they are given wings. In other words, once you enter the domain of love, love will buoy you up. You don't have to do everything on your own. He's got another saying. Rumi also said elsewhere, your task is not to seek love. For most of us, when we look for love, we're looking outside of ourselves for some object in the world. Another person, a situation, a certain amount of money in the bank, my favorite meal, whatever the case. I love it, I love it, I love it. But Rumi says, your task is not to seek love, but to discover the barriers within yourself that you have built against love. We don't have to seek love because we are enmeshed in love. It is ubiquitous in the universe because of the nature of who God is. Love one another, for God is love. And that is not a uniquely Christian idea. It's a claim contemplatives across the world religions make. And if we're not experiencing that love in any given moment, there's something within us preventing us from experiencing that love. And Rumi says, you have to do the work within you to figure out what is going on within you. What is going on within you that prevents you from experiencing love? So, there's a lot of work to do to get to the domain of love. All right, let's talk about forgiveness for a minute, or 10. Y'all know the Lord's Prayer? I'm not going to make you recite it in unison, but I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to read you a different version. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Thy will be done. You know, it doesn't say my will be done. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Ponder that. Forgive us our sins as we have forgiven those who have sinned against us. Isn't that a frightening prospect? And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So for those of you who want to do some theological digging, there's an Aramaic scholar named Neil Douglas Klotz. And he wrote a book called Prayers of the Cosmos, and he wrote another one, the title of which escapes me at the moment. But what Neil does is he looks at the early Aramaic New Testament to understand the life and message of Jesus. A lot of people think Jesus spoke Hebrew. Some people even think Jesus spoke Greek, because it was a Hellenized world. Jesus spoke Aramaic. And so by the time you get to an English version of the New Testament, which has been translated from a Greek version of the New Testament, which might even have been translated from some Hebrew from the early disciples in the early Christian communities, that was rooted in the Aramaic, you might be 4 languages removed from what the heck Jesus did and said when he was on this earth. So Neil looks at the Aramaic New Testament, and there actually is one, and there is an argument to be made that it's the earliest one, and implicitly maybe the most accurate. And he tries to reinterpret the life and message of Jesus through the Aramaic. And he rewrote the Lord's Prayer. It's in one of those books, probably the one whose name I can't remember, but they're cheap. Get them both if you want. And I read that, and I thought, That is a much more compelling Lord's Prayer. But then I took some license. I took 3 years of Hebrew, 2 years of Greek in preparation for ministry. And I have a decades-long spiritual study and practice. And so I kind of have my own lens as well that I look at things through. So I looked at Neil's Aramaic version of the Lord's Prayer. And I said to myself, close but not quite. So I tweaked it and rewrote it. This is my version of the Lord's Prayer, rooted mostly in Neil's version of the Lord's Prayer, coupled with my own subjective understanding of the spiritual life. So the English, "Our Father who art in heaven," can be more accurately rendered source of being, because there's no gender pronoun referencing God in the Aramaic. Source of being that manifests all things, by which we perceive your existence. Hallowed be thy name. Or, I prepare a place within myself, free of worldly attachments, where I may experience your presence. Light, sound, vibration, manifestation. Thy kingdom come, more accurately rendered, may my will merge with your will. Thy will be done, realizing your beneficent intent within me, on earth as it is in heaven, that I may act in accordance with the divine order. Give us this day our daily bread. Provide the wisdom and strength that I need this day. Forgive us our debts and restore my relation to you, as we also have forgiven our debtors. In equal measure, that I restore relations with those who have offended me. And lead us not into temptation. Help me avoid the entanglement of worldly desires, but deliver us from evil. Direct me away from wrongful action. So here's the Aramaic interpretation with Alex's spin on it that I'm offering for you today. And when I've offered this in the past, a lot of people like it, so if you want to email me and I can send it to you. Source of being that manifests all things, by which we perceive your existence. I prepare a place within myself, free of worldly attachments, where I may experience your presence. Light, sound, vibration, manifestation. There can be a subjective connection with the beloved, and it can be known. May my will merge with your will, realizing your beneficent intent within me, that I may act in accordance with the divine order. Provide the wisdom and strength that I need this day. And here's the key part for this morning. And restore my relation to you in equal measure that I restore relations with those who have offended me. And restore my relation to you in equal measure that I restore relations with those who have offended me. Help me avoid the entanglement of worldly desires. And direct me away from wrongful action. Does this strike you as a frightening prospect, this line? Restore my relation to you, God, in equal measure that I restore relations with those scoundrels who have offended me. Does that frighten you? Asking God to love and embrace you with the same measure that you have loved and embraced the scoundrels in your life? I got some work to do. I don't know about you. I'll raise my hand as the sinner this morning. I find this a frightening prospect. I got to love better, which was another one of my bumper stickers, by the way. Love better. I got to love better. Now, I suspect everyone here needs to love better. Because if we want to be a truly beloved community, we have to love better. Every community I've ever known that has professed to be a beloved community needs to love better. So how do we do that? Well, if you want to sincerely ask God to love you in proportion to how much you have loved the scoundrels in your life, to accept you to the same degree you have accepted the scoundrels in your life, it seems that conversation about forgiveness might be in order. That's a hard one too. I think I've thrown out 5 years of pondering for us all this morning. Forgiveness is a hard topic because we set as many conditions on forgiveness as we do on love. Yes, there is tension in my relationship with that scoundrel. But I'm going to let the tension ride because I think they deserve my wrath. After all, they're a scoundrel. And until the scoundrel comes to terms with their scoundrelness and demonstrates to me that they know they're the wrongdoer, I'm not going to forgive. I think that is kind of the implicit psychological mechanism in all of our alienation from other people. But do you remember when I introduced the scoundrel a year ago to you? We're all scoundrels. We are all scoundrels. And if you weren't here a year ago, a quick catch-up, because that might sound insulting. Don't leave church in a huff this morning. To say we're all scoundrels just means being human is hard. It's another one of my bumper stickers. Being human is hard. Right? And we're all doing the best we can. And despite how hard we try to do the best we can, having this difficult human experience, we still get it wrong from time to time. And sometimes we get it really, really wrong. So we're scoundrels. But we're not to blame. Because being human is hard. If you really understand that, forgiveness is just a breath away. And only when we forgive, only when we restore relations to the scoundrels in our lives, will we be living beloved community? Will you, in the context of your own life, be a loving presence in the world? So forgiveness is key. How's that for a steep path? So I'm going to sum up my thoughts this morning that I truly hope you'll ponder. I truly hope you'll ponder these thoughts this morning. Because there's a lot in these thoughts this morning for us to work on as a beloved community. And for whoever's far-flung in the YouTube world out there, there are a lot of thoughts in this sermon for you to work on as you consider beloved community. So I'll sum it up like this, a couple of questions. Would you rather win wars or win hearts? Would you rather win wars or win hearts? Would you rather be right or be in relationship? Would you rather be right or be in relationship? Beloved, love one another, even as I have loved you. Our last hymn this morning is number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. Please rise as you are able. All right, please be seated. I'm throwing a lot of Christianity at you today. I hope you're okay with it. Not only do I love to help people understand the mystic poets, I really love helping people reacquaint themselves with the gospel. There is so much spiritual and psychological depth in the New Testament that we miss because the teachings have eroded. But there's so much there. Something as simple as this from James, with which we'll close our service. Be doers of the word. Be doers of the word and not merely hearers. Those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act. Being not hearers who forget. Have you been remembering to remember? But doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. Namaste, my friends.